Let's see, we got Mick and
Yeah,
Gio.
hello everybody.
Okay. 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 That's fine. Okay.
Morning, Josh.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.
Well, okay. Hello. Leitia Tamata is on the line from Marshall Islands.
Great to have Marshall Islands on.
Well, seven.
Okay, I'll bring in my niece and Mika. Okay,
Him. Legislation controversy. Him.
Didn't even go away. Oh, I'm not ada nih mana?
Zoom. Ini connect na?
Bisa kalian. Hey, hindi pa natin screen to.
Sama-sama yang shooting ko naman.
Paula's iPhone. Look at that. I haven't seen you forever.
This guy too.
Always had a good fan.
Hello, good morning everybody.
Good morning.
Morning, Mia.
Morning.
Okay.
Good morning.
So good morning, everyone. Welcome, Bula. Can you, let me see. Greetings from Sydney and from DTP. We're very pleased to co-host this event with Joshua Cooper in Hawaii and with Siali in Suva. And it follows a side event at the High Level Political Forum earlier today, which was a more formal engagement with the VNR and LNR process for the SDGs. We thought, given that time was so inhospitable to the Pacific, there would be value in coming together and talking more informally and reflecting on the SDGs in this time of COVID and on the process of the VNRs and how useful it is or not, whether it enables and allows participation of Pacific peoples in their own discussions, planning around development. I think it would be appropriate for me just to acknowledge at the beginning that we're on Indigenous land here in Sydney at DTP. We're on the land of the Bejugal people as part of the Eora Nation, and we pay our respects to the traditional owners of the land here, past and present. Having said that, I think it would be very nice if we've got Siale online, to pass to Siale now to run the show. Siale, we've been working with, from the diplomacy training programs, been working with Piango over many years, and more intensively over the last couple of years, focused on business and human rights and the SDGs, and of course with Joshua. So Siale, can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Patrick. Drew, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Drew, can you unmute yourself, Drew? Maybe as a Pacific platform, I asked Drew to have just a short word of prayer before we start, please. Malo, Drew.
Malo, Siale, let's pray. Dear Lord, our Heavenly Father, we thank you for all the great things you have bestowed upon all our lives. At the same time, you also challenge us in how we work together and move together at this particular time and difficult of COVID-19. We ask your blessing and your insights and your wisdom to see how we move forward at this particular time and how we can all work together as CSO, as family, that we can be able to overcome difficulties, and we can do it with your support. We ask this through your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Drew. Just an introduction to the space that we had now. That I think a lot of us in the region, we find ourselves that we struggle with SDGs in terms of how it's being implemented in our different countries. Not because that we find that it's not that there are things is not happening. It's just that we feel that as much as we want to engage and have our civil society participated in the implementation of the SDGs in our various communities and in our different countries, we still find that engaging with government is a challenge. And we are having a couple of people from Hawaii, Joshua and his team, that we would also like to hear them share how they have taken SDG and socialized it and localized it that fit their context and their cultural settings. They recognize the indigenous knowledge and traditional knowledge. And I think that's, for me, it's quite inspiring, because if we want to see change in how the implementation of SDG into our respective strategic sustainable development priorities, civil society need to have a stronger push in making sure that those priorities are reflected in our national strategic plans, sectorial strategic plans, and many other things that we can find that can help us in the directions in defining the kind of priorities that we need to have in our different countries. We have been supporting from Piango our civil society network in the region for the 4 countries that has been reporting this year.
CLA, you still there? Can't hear CLA from here.
It's okay. You're not alone. No one can hear Ciale right now.
Okay.
I know how sometimes that works with the link. I guess maybe we can just continue where Ciale was talking and hope maybe Patrick can build on that. But what Piango was doing so far during this VNR is building on the work of last year. Last year, we had small trainings inside countries around the upcoming voluntary national reviews with the diplomacy training program. I see some people on the call right now and on the webinar that we were working together before those reviews taking place in Fiji and Tonga, and then was organizing to make sure that the voice from the people on the ground was present in the entire VNR process and able to make sure that the human rights issues and, more importantly, the most important imminent issues for each island was be able to be raised in that process. If Ciale is back on, we'll let her to continue. If not, I'll just keep going in the sense that we were able to organize and partner with the one group known as the major groups. The major groups and other stakeholders, MGOS, was able to coordinate for indigenous peoples, also for women, also for youth, and then to make sure that the voice of the people was able to be heard. For the last 2.5 weeks, we've been meeting in small groups based on everyone's main areas of advocacy. And of course, if we look back on it, it's sort of a very interesting process. I know Ciale raised it yesterday and she'll probably talk about it. It's weaker than the Universal Periodic Review. The periodic review, of course, has a follow-up process to be able to hold governments more accountable. It's a 3.5-hour review as opposed to a 30-minute and a 20-minute, depending if it's your first or second review. We know you can't really look at 17 goals in 30 minutes. It's basically a goal a minute. And also then, of course, have the points be able to be raised by the people. So that was some of the issues that were being raised yesterday. And that's one of the points that we were then coordinating to move that along. And usually the exciting thing about the VNR is you usually have a year to prepare. So right now we do have a year to look ahead to the next ones that will come up. Those next ones that have already been stated that'll happen for 2021 is actually looking at Tuvalu has already said that they will go next year. Another country that said that they will go is also the Marshall Islands. So those two are lined up. So what we can do is think about it, not only reviewing what happened in the last month and wrapping up today for the voluntary national reviews of 4 countries, of Faroe States of Micronesia, of Samoa, of Papua New Guinea, which we saw a lot of amazing videos about this morning with the Sepik River, as well as the different important issues there with the voice from all the people focusing on development and to focus on the principle of free, prior, and informed consent. And then finally, the Solomon Islands that just went today. So when you find out your country is going to be reviewed, it's good to actually educate people about the Sustainable Development Goals, what those mean, how those relate to other international obligations the government has already agreed to. And then to begin, really the most important part is educating about sharing what these goals are and about this process and what it can and cannot do, and how it can be a tool to then mobilize the people's movements around the islands. And one of the important things I think that came out of this morning, as well as peer-to-peer, how we can come together and talk with each other. because that's really the main thing, is learning from one another what works in some islands. So in a way, it's really connecting together on creative campaigns that we can learn from one another and how we can make that happen. The other aspect of Siale is not back, is looking at the important issue of preparing a stakeholder report. And while the government creates their report, stakeholders can also write a stakeholder report where you highlight the priorities that you feel should be addressed at the voluntary national review during that time. And that's the process we've worked with Piengo during the last month. Those were calls at all hours of the day and night for many of us. And it was great because it did actually get people who maybe don't talk to each other in their NGOs to actually see the connection between all of their issues. So breaking out of our cylinders of excellence, the silos, and sharing with one another about the important principles of solidarity and social justice. Then, of course, the solution, it's not enough, of course. We only get a 300-word statement and a 2-minute intervention. And so we've been able to make sure and work with Patrick and DTP that the people in each country are able to speak. That's not always easy as well, even at the when that's happening, because all the major groups and other stakeholders have to share that time, and many different groups want to speak at different times. So I think we can say, if we look at the VNR, while the space is shrinking and it's difficult to do everything via Zoom and these processes, the other side is it's really important to be able to make sure that we take advantage of all the spaces and share the strategies, and more importantly, decide what we care about the most to make sure that that issue is raised during those interventions. Patrick, is there anything you'd like to add about the interventions? And then we can also look at the rest of the program. We have a couple of different aspects, and we want to invite the people of the Pacific to share about the VNR and any stories that they've had, either in 2018 with Samoa, Kiribati as well, Australia, and then last year we had New Zealand, Aotearoa, and Fiji, as well as Tonga, and this year the 4 countries that we already reviewed. Patrick?
Thank you. Sorry. Thanks very much, Joshua. I think we're all grappling with the technology, and that's been a strange thing as well about the VNR this year, is it's all such a virtual process and how to engage. Normally the side events are held in meetings in the UN headquarters in New York, I understand. So this has been a very strange time. I think we've got Siale back. So we might jump over to Siale, and if we can't hear, I can give a bit more background about how the diplomacy training program has been working with its partners in the Pacific to try and look at how do we use all of the different human rights processes, UN processes, try and make sure that people's voices are heard, the voices from the Pacific are heard and have influence over the decisions at this time when we're facing the crisis of COVID, but also the longer, deeper crisis of climate change. So, Siale?
Thank you, Patrick. Can you hear me now?
We can, that's great.
Okay. Sorry that I've been kind of cut off. So I'll just give a short reflections on why we thought that we have this conversation. One is that it's usually a Pacific cultural a practice that if there is one wedding or funeral or a big event, that we often come back and reflect, and of course it's around food sometimes or around a few dances here and there, but there's always that space that's made available to relatives and families to reflect on how things are and how we can do it better. And it's often based on the fact that we are not writing things up because we are very oral culture. And most of the time it's just coming around, sitting around, sometimes around a the Talanoa, Kavabolo, or whatnot, to share and reflect on often over a few jokes here and there, and Joshua got there the Talanoa and the coconut shell cup. But it's a significant a token of how we want to have this space to allow us just to reflect on how we see things on, but not just to complain about what that has not been working, but also to recognize that there are limitations on the VNR and the SDG implementation in the reporting, and one of that is the actual accountability mechanisms that we have seen that a lot of the countries that have reported, civil society in those countries find it really hard to follow through some of the recommendations that, and one of the things that we recognize now that, like Samoa this year, this is their second round. So it seems like that our countries are going to be coming around for their second term of reporting. We have heard just in our here in Fiji that they might be interested to opt in to report next year, but that is yet to confirm. But we have noted. But then at the same time, it's get to a point where we are thinking that it's become like a show of some sort, of government just like reporting for the sake of reporting because they want to feel good about. But then at the same time, it's also something that they want to see attract the attentions of donors in terms of what they do. So whatever those kind of reasons, we noted that holding accountable some of those mechanisms is not in place. But then we also recognize that there are other mechanisms like the UPR, and some of our countries are reporting. Joshua has been had make reference to Samoa this year. Was it this year or last year, Joshua? That the CRC, the Convention for the Right of the Children, was being hosted in Samoa for the first time that it was ever done somewhere outside of New York. So we have seen a lot of those mechanisms that are open for us to use, where it has a much more stronger mandated for civil society and government to report back, much more stronger in terms of the voluntary nature of the SDG and the VNR. So this is why we are creating this, and we are having the diplomacy training program who are working with us in terms of training people to understand the different human rights mechanisms, the business component of those principles that we need to use to hold our leaders accountable and to see that there are change. What government had put up as their aspirations for change is really happening. And so we are not limiting ourselves to see the VNR process and the SDG, but we are looking at any other mechanisms available to us to make sure that people are at the center of development in our regions. But at the same time, also we have the team, Joshua and the team from Hawaii. They had, and we have seen the SDG and the VNR process of reporting that is consistently being stated in all of the reports to the UN, that data management is one of the key challenges that all of our countries are facing. So those came from Hawaii. They have something to share in terms of how they had been able to capture those learning, those data, and make it easier for the community and people on the ground to report in terms of what have they seen. Not just the things that they have wanted to see change, but reporting also the good practices that our communities has already done in relation to SDG and in the report to the VNR. So I'm talking too much, but this is the program it's going to be look like. After this, I'll just invite some of our colleagues. We have some of the team from the Solomon Islands, from our CSO Solomon Islands. So I'll call upon them as they show up that they are connected. And then we also have the team from RMI. We have the Tonga team, of which they have reported last year. And it would be good to have a quick share from them whether they have seen anything change or anything that has been an outcome of what has happened. And so I'll call on them for those that I see their names comes up, just to have a quick sharing of their reporting this year. But we also have our colleagues from the CCF here in Fiji, which they have done tremendous work on the UPR process, and they are partner with us and the training diplomacy training program. And then from there, I will leave it to Joshua in his team to share their practice. Is that something that look like a plan, or you have anything to add, Patrick?
I think that sounds like a terrific plan, Siale. We feel that's a really lovely overview, and I think if you just take it, we'll go with you, and we hope that everybody has a chance to speak. We can use the chat function on the side. We can have questions, and we hope to be able to go and hear a multitude of voices. As I say, the sense here is it's very informal, and we want people to have the chance to talk. And I think the way you've suggested, Siale, sounds really, really helpful. It's good to have this opportunity.
I'll call upon Alice. Alice, who is the speaker from the Solomon Islands. Unfortunately, this morning she was not able to present the CSO statement for the Solomon Islands, and we have been certain to see the fact that sometimes the courtesy given to government to call upon them number of times to take the floor was not given to civil society. When we are giving a very small window of opportunity to respond, and if we don't get connected, we are just like, that's it for us, and we are never being called back to report. So we often find that the whole principle of leaving no one behind seems to be not as it should have been. So Alice, if you can now take the floor, and I would love to give you the opportunity to present what you had in your team at TSC and Solomon Islands has prepared so much effort into it, but you were not given that opportunity this morning. Alice, can you hear me, Alice? Yeah. Hi, Alice.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, hello. Yes, yeah. So from the Solomon side, we have been preparing for a long time to share our presentation. I mean, our response to our governmental report. We were very excited at the beginning. Unfortunately, technically, we are not connected when a 10 comes. So it was a sad moment for all of us in the team here waiting. And we really feel that still there's people left behind globally. Even technically, we can feel this. So it's very, very sad, but hopefully we will meet face-to-face after the COVID, so that we'll ensure that we share our response at the platform.
Alice, do you maybe want to share some of the points you were going to raise? Even though you weren't able to make them, you could at least share them here and make the statement now.
Yeah, so we In fact, we really want to congratulate our Solomon Island government on their effort to align policy and plans with the SDGs and embrace the international agenda, and also including CSO from the early stage of the VNR process. But while we applaud the VNR committee's use of the often critical Auditor General report in the review, we also point out that poor governance and political interference in service provision are major issues holding back development in Solomon Island. We single out the Rural Constituency Development Fund, which currently distributes 60% of the entire development budget directly to 50 members of parliament control. The recent and only evaluation of the 20-year program concluded the fund was highly politicized, with inefficient programs and large transaction and administration costs. Delivering services and micro projects directly to rural communities is an excellent idea when in the hands of the appropriate Ministry of Provincial Government and Institutional Strengthening, and the assisting Ministry of Agriculture with the real input of local communities and civil society. In education, we also see and capture a huge budget by political elite. Scholarship consume more than 40% of the entire education budget. Spending is now just 82 USD per primary school and over 18,000 USD per tertiary student. The report mentions improved girls' access to education, but there is no mention of those living with disability. So we recommend that the Rural Constituency Development Funds should be diverted back to the line ministries for their programs following proper provincial and community participation. And the scholarship program should be massively scaled back and saving used for critical intervention. The government also need to ratify the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and approve and properly fund the dormant inclusive education policy. Also, we noted here the government to address data gaps to gauge the real progress of SDGs, better coordination among public, private, and civil society organizations, strengthening local governments, and ensure justice for all. Create enabling environment for civil society to incorporate human rights-based approaches and adopt inclusive and innovative strategies and ensure ample finances for the implementation of SDGs. So this is our recommendation, and we are looking forward for better policy to ensure that no one is left behind. Especially we are focusing on the ratification of on the Convention on the Rights of Peoples with Disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Mahalo.
Hello, Alice. I've seen that Inia is also with Alice from TSC office. Inia is our recent board chair for Piango. Inia, if you want to say something in reflections of your work with the VNR.
Thank you, CLA, and thank you, everyone. We are glad this morning to be part of the process, but as Alice mentioned that technically we were not able to put out our statement, even though we didn't manage to read our statement. We believe that we will find a way to submit the statement to our government. And already, as part of the government delegation, is secretary for the DSC, which the government already make mention to have our statements. So with that collaboration, we believe that even though we not able to participate during the process, but our statement will end up with the government as a consent to the consent that we have been working on it. I think just overall of the process, I think for us, we have participation and involvement with the government, how we can support each other to work on the countries we are. The earliest stage, we have been working very close in collaboration in planning and training and all sorts of kind of a planning. But somehow this COVID came, and that's where it disrupted the whole planning, and that's where we start to lose focus on how we can really really come up with a report. So that's one of the challenge that all of us recognize, and all of a sudden this Vienna thing just popped out and everyone was rushing, that is due to the pandemic. But the thing that we start to recognize, we realize, and also the governments, it's like the government start to realize that, as we highlighted in a statement, that data is one of the main issue here. It's a big gap, and mainly that during over the past 2 days, Jennifer, through with the communication back to the government, I think they realized that we CSO have quite a good number of data, and they have been asking a number of reports. We feel that our government society, when it comes to it's supporting, it's supporting them. So even though we are head on to some of the issue, but I feel that with this process, we're still hoping that at the administration level, I still see that there is a great potential that this partnership can be better coordinated, and how we can better improve, especially in presenting a report. So that's the comment on this partnership. Coming back to the CSO, I also feel that there is need for an improved collaboration with all the CSO. It can also help us in preparing the report. So maybe that's my few remarks, and I thank my GSC team and the volunteers for their hard work, and also Piango for the support. I believe that this kind of support shows that we are stand for each other, and I believe that we will continue that spirit of supporting and to empower each other to participate on these high-level meetings. That's a comment for me. Maybe Jennifer can add on other areas where she feels that need, but overall, even though we are disappointed, but we feel that this report will end up, this statement will end up with our government. Thank you.
Excuse me, let me ask a question, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to ask a question. Yeah, please, if you give me the chance, I want to ask this question to all everybody. So the question what I would like to ask about is, I'm from Myanmar. Let me introduce myself first. I'm from Myanmar. The place I was born is the fusion with the civil war. and also with the COVID-19 this time in the various of time. So and then we have many problems with the government and the indigenous people in the Myanmar. So what we are facing in the Myanmar is, especially our indigenous people is very poor education and development too. But in this time, there's many people are displaced by war because of civil war. We have been faced with the for 70 years, over 70 years with the civil war, and also over until now we are continuously facing the civil war. So, especially there's around the 200,000 of people displaced by war in the refugee camp, and they have helpless. And also other organizations like the NGO and CSO, they're trying to help to the refugee people, but the government stopped to them. They could not get any assistance from the government and any organization of the NGO, CSO organization. So I hope that there's the CSO society organization, like some organization trying to help those people. But there's a really difficult time in this in COVID-19 time. That's why. What I would like to ask about this, as the government, this is very responsibility to help those people, indigenous people, but we could not get any assistance now. So for this government losing of their responsibility, what we can reply? Thank you so much for this question.
Joshua, can I ask you to respond?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I would love to. So I think one of the most important issues is actually another meeting that's happening right now, but it's happening in Geneva. So you might be on the wrong call in that way. It's the UN Human Rights Council, and they actually have a commission of inquiry that's focusing on Myanmar and collecting the information and then using that for future cases for violations of human rights and crimes against humanity. The Human Rights Council's meeting is still going on tomorrow, and I can look if it's on the agenda that Myanmar's there, but I was looking at Syria because I was helping people from there as well, and also in refugee camps and also battling COVID. So Patrick has my email, so I can try to assist you and help to connect about Myanmar. Also, the other issue is we have a great person who's on the Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights for ICHR, for ASEAN. And she is doing great work. And now ICHR can actually accept human rights violations. So I would say we should work with Yuyun, who is the official Indonesian member to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. And that would be the space. Not so much with the Sustainable Development Goals, but it definitely falls in under SDG 16 on peace and justice, and as well as reducing inequalities with the indigenous angle. But I just will try to leave it to that short comment, and I can email with you and put that in the chat box, and we can try to follow up with the Human Rights Council tomorrow. But it also meets again in September. And September is the session where they look at indigenous people's rights. So hopefully I can be able to help you that way, Myo, and I hope that's a little bit helpful. While we're focusing on Pacific, I know it's life and death and absolutely essential, and understand why you want to raise that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No problem.
Yeah, and also,
Okay, maybe I could invite Drew. Are you still on the call? I don't have anyone else from the other countries that are reported, but I thought that I'll give Drew like 2 minutes just to share, because the Tonga was reported the VNR last year in Fiji. And then I'll give a quick 2 minutes to Laitia from Marshall Islands, just to share what's their plan for next year in terms of how the diplomacy training program at CTF asks Joshua and his team can help them in terms of thank you, Drew. 2 minutes, please, to share your VNR experience from Tonga last year.
Malo, thank you. I think we were not quite successful last year as we had hoped with government trying to work on government statement together. At the end, it was a rush. So I think, as Josh, you have said that we need the whole year to prepare. And I think that time was of essence for us. We were not. And secondly, our director not able to get a visa. So we somewhat missed out. But I think that Fiji and Bianco sort of to the high level meeting. But I think the lesson learned from us is we need to start early. We need to have the whole year, and we need to make sure who is going early or who is going to present on the Zoom. And also compliment or to show the gaps in what company is doing. We also were planning on a shadow report, but we did not get around to do the shadow report. So we hope that next time Tonga comes up, CSO will be more prepared. Thank you. I think that's the 2 minutes.
Siale? Okay, if we lost Siale, I thought we might go if there's one more.
Any question, Josh?
I can still hear you. I know you finished there, so and you definitely did do the 2 minutes, so you're ready for the United Nations. You're effective and the trainings worked. I was going to say that we might I know Celeste has to go on the hour, and Siale had mentioned a couple aspects about the dashboard and accountability. I thought we might let Celeste talk about that before she has to leave. We also have Kate Brown with us, and we were having an exciting conversation earlier about Fiji and how Fiji was mobilizing with Facebook and youth around the COVID response, but also building back better. And we might be able to do that with Lucretia next, if we look at those two areas as next steps, or if there's another representative from Pacific Island that's on, it would go right after Celeste, if that sounds good. And then at the closing part of our program, or the middle, where it looks at, we have Ambassador Amanda Ellis, who will be able to share a bit about the UN SDG number 5 on gender equality, but also a vast amount of experience in the region of Oceania, as well as experience here in Hawaii. And then we're fortunate to have a film focusing on Samoa, one of the countries that was featured in the VNR, to wrap up also with the co-producers and directors being able to discuss about making the film and connecting with the theme that was raised by Alice numerous times about leaving no one behind and making sure that it's an inclusive process. And that, of course, is one of the improvements of Sustainable Development Goals. And the 2030 agenda is not just having everything, but aiming to make sure leaving no one behind and to make sure everyone's included. So that's an important element. And we think that brings up a great program. And if Siale's back, she can guide us if there's an aspect before Celeste. Otherwise, I'd hand it to Celeste then. And then we go back to the Pacific, maybe with Kate on Fiji, as well as Lucretia. But Celeste?
Aloha and mahalo, Josh. We're really so delighted to be here with our Pacific colleagues and friends and family today. And I want to thank you and Patrick and Siale for really partnering and allowing us to partner with you in this celebration of voluntary national reviews and voluntary local reviews. I think for us in Hawaii, it's so important to have the, as we say, this ohana, this family of people focusing on these issues, because we don't really have a national priority on the SDGs. And so the way that we've had to approach this, and which has actually been quite good, is that it's very much driven by our communities and what matters to us at the local level. And so just by way of background, in Hawaii, prior to the SDGs actually having been agreed, we had a locally and culturally appropriate framework for sustainability that was driven by our community and grassroots partners, but with our business and our government and civil society partners. I should also say, so we're a public-private partnership, and we launched the Aloha Plus Challenge, which is the initiative I mentioned. And it's really important for us to say that actually our initiative was inspired by other island partners. So the Micronesia Challenge inspired the Caribbean Challenge. And then we had Ambassador Ronnie Jamo from Seychelles come to Hawaii and challenge Hawaii to get on board and be a model for sustainability. And so now we find ourselves in a situation where we're all working together. I do want to acknowledge Amanda Ellis, who is on our board. And we're also delighted to partner with the Global Island Partnership and Kate Brown, who was so instrumental in helping Hawaii get where we are today. And so for us, it's really exciting to see how we are approaching these in different ways. We say we measure what matters. And so in order to find out what we should measure, we really need to go into our communities and to find out what matters to our communities. And that's what we did with Hawaii Green Growth over 3 years. We had a ongoing stakeholder engagement process across all of our different counties. And those were our counties sharing actually this morning. But we also knew that we needed to bring our political leadership with us and create opportunities for them to lead, and our businesses that also want to contribute. So as we say in Hawaii, it was a kako effort. Ciala mentioned the dashboard. So we actually manage an online dashboard, which provides transparency and accountability across all of our goals. And while Hawaii's goals are locally and culturally appropriate to us, they do roll up to the broader SDGs. And it was that island-led work that got us recognized by the United Nations as a hub for sustainability solutions. So on the dashboard, every day of the week, you can actually see how we're doing. And everybody feels a responsibility to that, not just the government or civil society or philanthropy, to businesses. Our businesses want to be tracked on the dashboard. So now with the Global Island Partnership, we are the co-secretariat to the Local 2030 Island Network. And that's a platform of islands sharing with other islands to make sure that we have these island-led approaches. Our model builds on 1,000 years of indigenous knowledge and wisdom. And that's critically important. It's foundational to what we do. And as somebody who grew up on an island, I'm from Oahu. I'm from Hawaii originally, but I spent a lot of my career overseas at the United Nations as well. I've always felt and known that islands have the solutions to the sustainability challenges that we face. We just need to be able to communicate with each other and get the support that we need to uplift our solutions. I put the dashboard in the chat. We are very excited to work with any and all of you on the dashboard to share what we've learned and our own journey. And we're going to be changing that soon. I wanted to certainly give Amanda and Kate, Josh, if it's appropriate, or hand it back to you, an opportunity to correct anything that I said or add to it. But just to say that it's a real pleasure to see everybody on this call. And thank you for allowing us to share and to be part of this.
Mahalo, Celeste. We really appreciate partnering, and it's been a great morning. How about we'll see if there's any Pacific Islanders that were on, and then we'll definitely go to Kate after that, and as well as Lucretia, and that way we're still able to make sure you were able to participate. And then we'll go to the Pacific to share more, and then come back to Amanda after that next step. And hopefully Ciala is on as well, and she can moderate that aspect. But mahalo, Celeste. Okay, I would then hand it over to Kate, and that's a perfect aspect then to link. And Kate can also definitely fill in any gaps that you might have questions about with Celeste, and definitely share not only the amazing work she's doing with GLISPA, but then also mobilizing around. And she's also an amazing community activist as well, one of the folks that we always see balancing our work on the ground with the global. So if I don't hear Siale on, then I'll definitely hand it over to Kate. And I know you had a lot of great examples that you were sharing about things going on in Fiji, and then maybe we can have Lucretia continue that conversation.
Oh, you mean me? Okay. Yes. So kia ora. I've just actually moved back to the region after 10 years living in the US. So this is a wonderful side event to be a part of. And I think my observations, I really want to say that I really appreciated the Solomon Islands intervention there, is that there's still a large disconnection between sometimes things that are reported at the international level and the reality of both the positive and the negative things happening on the ground. And I think it's one of the reasons that we work together with Hawaii on trying to combat this with a kind of a more locked-in process that enables all of these different groups to come together, to learn from each other, to share, and to make sure that what's being reported at the international level is kind of the best that we can get to. And I think often, just like we are, people that are working in government are under some of the same issues in terms of trying to understand how to run that process, how to feed it in, and also how you don't spend a year putting a lot of work into something that isn't useful next week. That is just a lot of stuff put on a computer somewhere. So all of this, this thinking about how do we kind of have a process at national level where everyone can be a part of, how do we make sure that that story is being told? And it's not just, it's through the VNR, but it's also the stories and examples of all these different islands and what they're doing. I work globally on island issues, and I hear things working everywhere. So I think on Fiji, Josh, about the Facebook group that started after COVID-19, there's basically a lot of examples, things working. Tomorrow, actually, myself and someone from Palau are presenting to the Caribbean about lessons learned from things that happened in Micronesia, because just as Celeste said, there's a lot of desire to learn from each other. And I think we're missing that at the national level at the UN. And the SDGs are an opportunity to do this better. So we need to also take responsibility to think about how we engage locally our people, and to make sure. Moving back to New Zealand, I'm living on the land that I come from, and I had to explain to my uncle what the sustainable development goals were. That was a challenge, but it's a reality check. We have to be out there in our community, kind of helping to make that if you interviewed him, he would have an answer.
You, Kate. Those are excellent points. And I think it also reminds us of the film that we showed, Ahika, where it actually showed really, of course, it's the ancestral wisdom and knowledge that has existed for thousands of years. And now SDGs is sort of like a lighter version of that is palpable, since we have business and all these other interests trying to balance everything together. So definitely those points. And I think the point that you raised as well about the local 2030 is it's the peer-to-peer that we can find the examples. I know when I was in Samoa as well, every house has a ulu breadfruit tree in front of it. And, everyone is growing. And we see that now with the t-shirt that was on with our colleagues from Solomon Islands, that now we have to start being more self-reliant, and we've relaxed that. And now it's a chance to become more, to return to our roots and to work with the land, to then be able to make sure that we are able to exercise all those elements. So excellent points there, Kate. Are there any questions for Celeste or Kate before Celeste has to go, and then we hand it back to Siale and move with Lucretia? Okay, Lucretia, you're on. Would you like to continue and build on that with some examples?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm not sure whether you can hear me. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Kate. I just wanted to echo two of the points that you raised. One, that governments are trying to learn the process, and we find that that's specifically we're able to relate to that specifically here in Fiji. And two, the narratives that are portrayed at international platforms may not be as reflective of what's happening here on the ground. So for specifically Fiji, the Citizens Constitutional Forum, we've been the secretariat for the Universal Periodic Review. And it's over the years, we've learned and we've tried to improve the collaborative efforts when Fiji does report. So with the VNR process, we had our partners, the Fiji Council of Social Services sort of managed that space. But there were a couple of points that I just wanted to highlight on her behalf. One is that collaborative efforts is really, really important because, we're at the end of the day, we're all working in our own spaces. And so it's important to bring that conversation back together with the monitoring that we're doing. Two was we had to do a mapping exercise. So we're not, we're racing against time. So we didn't have the luxury of time to be, for 2 or 3 NGOs to be working on one specific issue. So civil society organizations had to come together and look at, okay, what your mandate was and what SDG goals you were trying to, address. The other thing was networking was really important through our partners DTP, Joshua Cooper, and OHCHR, the regional office here in Fiji. We were able to reach out for capacity building and technical expertise. So the VNR process for us, Joshua had highlighted it. I think if you hadn't highlighted it, we wouldn't have had any idea. So then we quickly all scrambled together and started with the process. The report that came out last year by the civil society will really be like a baseline for us because this is a very new process for us. So going forward, hopefully if Fiji does report, decide to report next year or in 2022, this will be a report to build on. So we're looking to be a part of, bettering that process going forward. The other thing was our challenges in Fiji was, trying to get information to be able to say, yes, we're on the right track to achieving this. But for us, the information and access to information was rather difficult. So you would see along the way, we would put out statements calling on the state to make certain documents accessible or publicly available. I think I've hit the 2 minutes, and that's all I have to share on behalf of Fiji and the VNR. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucretia. And I think you brought up a point that sort of built on what Kate said, that, it's not just a process where they make a report that sits on a shelf, but that more importantly, it engages people and people can participate and make sure their voice is heard, but also in a way to partner with one another. I know we call it the Universal Periodic Review, Uniting People for Rights, and then being able to make some recommendations that would change policies and practices that aren't working for the people.
Yes.
Right. Siale, if you're back, if not, Siale, are you there? Is there anyone else from the Pacific that would want to share either a previous VNR or a current VNR this year? Okay, that is no problem. If we don't, just please put a note in the chat box because we do have an amazing program still continuing that pulls everything together. Our next speaker is a former ambassador from New Zealand to the UN in Geneva and also had amazing roles bringing the issue of gender to the UN Security Council as well, and now has an amazing program at Arizona State University and also is a board member of Hawaii Green Growth. I'd like to welcome Amanda Ellis and thank her so much for making time today. and being with us as Director of Global Partnerships for ASU's Global Issues Laboratory. And someone is actually doing graffiti, which is amazing.
Aloha and talofa, bula, kia ora. It's wonderful to be here, everybody. And thank you, Siale, Patrick, Josh, and to hear all of the experiences across the Pacific. I just wanted to remind Pacific neighbors that both Fiji and Aotearoa New Zealand joined together in Geneva to help support when you're coming to the Universal Period. And I had not heard Uniting People for Rights before. I think that's a fabulous way of categorizing the UPR. And of course, it takes us back to what Siali said. People are at the center of development. And of course, the point that Alice made too is that we can have no one left behind. And that segues very well, I think, into SDG 5 on gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. We know it's a big issue right across the region. And Alice pointed out the digital divide is very strong, both within communities, but also it's a gender issue as well. We know that COVID-19 has really exacerbated current inequalities, and particularly with regards to domestic violence, again, another big issue in the Pacific. And I think this notion of being able to hear all voices, and of course I come from a government background, having served as the head of the New Zealand Aid Agency in the Pacific, where I worked with all of your countries, and just making sure that we do have civil society voices. So Piango has been such an important voice in the region for so long. So a huge mahalo. Thank you for the work that you continue to do. A quick comment on New Zealand's voluntary national review, where we were able to bring in the Student Volunteer Army, which is the largest volunteer group in New Zealand, started just after the Christchurch earthquakes in 2011. And of course, all of our islands are subject to disasters. And it was wonderful to see that the Student Volunteer Army has been able to really continue their work, to take it into schools, and now to align it with all of the SDGs. And so I was thrilled to be able to work with them to make sure that that work, that civil society work, was actually being captured through a dashboard similar to Hawaii Green Growth. So we've been sharing. And I do think that that's a wonderful point of opportunity with the local 2030 Island Hub. And as a board member of Hawaii Green Growth, just encouraging you to take advantage of that hub and the expertise and the model of locally developed info, and that can be rolled up into an SDG framework. It could be a wonderful way of sharing and really helping to take things around data to the next level. So we had a very short video that we were going to show just a minute of around women's leadership. And this is a video that's been produced because this year is the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Women. It's the 20th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on Women, Peace and Security, and the 10th anniversary of the UN Women Empowerment Principles, and also of bringing the UN Women group together across the United Nations. So this short video is going to just give some insights into women's leadership. And I think it's important because the Pacific does have the lowest representation of women in any region in the world, including Middle East and Africa. So let's have a quick watch of this, and then hopefully we can have a discussion. Mahalo.
Hello, Amanda.
While you're queuing it, Giles, I'll just keep talking to say this was a partnership between the UN, the Interparliamentary Union, which has 178 member countries, the oldest multilateral body, and also the Council of Women World Leaders, which are the current and past women prime ministers and presidents, and which, of course, Hilda Heine was the first Pacific woman to be a member of, and then also the Women Political Leaders Forum. So it's a very inclusive process. And as we continue to do these videos, we'd love to hear from anyone, include anyone, just let us know.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And always good to definitely talk about the IPU and the partnership. And of course, looking as well, I think we also brought up that Vanuatu had 0 women in Parliament, I think.
Yes, and I think Solomon Islands has only had 4 over the last 4 decades too. So yeah, we know that there's a diversity dividend. So hopefully the video will just make that point.
Yes, I think though Amish has put on the Rogers video, which will be later. He's trying to get everybody excited about the Rogers movie.
That looks fantastic too.
Giving a sneak peek there to try to get everybody excited so no one wants to leave. But
so I'm just going to give a few more stats then. There's only 4% parliaments. Way back, ECOSOC said that they wanted to have gender equality in parliaments by 2000. We're now 2020, and there's only 4% of parliaments that have gender equality. We have around 7% of women who head countries. So we still have a long way to go. But hopefully we will be able to show you this if we can get the video to work. And if we can't, we will just have a discussion.
Let me see, I can. So Claire also should have a copy of that. If Amish does not.
Do you want me to say, I can maybe put it in the chat.
Sure. How about send, and I'll look at my email then. I just had forwarded earlier, but we can definitely, I think the conversation and the discussion around Beijing Plus 25, which was going to be a very major aspect around the Commission on Status of Women that many people from the Pacific were going to go to in March. And the other issues that you raised definitely are conversation starters that we could hear from other people in the Pacific regarding women's rights and gender justice.
Okay, and I guess the other thing too, so I'll send this through again now. The other thing that I think is really important is just remembering what a huge influence the Pacific has had on climate change. And when we all look at the Paris Accords, we would never have had 1.5 degrees on the radar screen without Pacific leadership. And I think that's been the exciting thing. If we look also in Hawaii, Hawaii was the first state to say, okay, even if President Trump is withdrawing from Paris, we're in. And now there's 24 other states. And same thing with 100% renewable energy. Hawaii's only got 1.5 million people, first to commit, and now there's 100 million Americans who are covered by local commitments. So I think we just need to remember that size is no object, and it can actually make a huge difference. Okay, so Josh, I'm sending this through to you again.
No problem. And I'm opening my email so I can receive that and share. And also asking Claire if she sees it in her email as well as Amish, since everyone's co-host. Amish, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, but I'm not able to get the video up.
Okay.
Okay, why don't we just move on, because I don't want to waste everybody's time, and it's just fantastic to have such a great group on the line.
No problem. So definitely it's still open if there's any conversation around Amanda's points. And if there is not, I would like to we can see how Amish was taking us to the next level, and he just is so omniscient, knowing where we're going, that we have the film that focuses on one of the countries that had the voluntary national review, Samoa, and it was an honor to be there. In fact, that was the last country I was in March while COVID was actually going on. And there in Samoa was the exciting point that was brought up earlier about the Committee on the Rights of the Child meeting. But as we know, there's a lot of issues in Samoa, and I was able to see this amazing film. And we've always wanted to partner with Dean and Joe and be able to show these films together. We're working on that for the Human Rights Council, which was brought up by our colleague from Myanmar earlier. But we haven't been able to do that with the current crisis. So we thought it was amazing, while we're looking at Samoa, to look at one example and definitely make sure that we leave no one behind, including LGBTQIA. Dean and Joe, if there's anything you'd like to say prior to the film, and then, of course, we would be able to answer questions as well afterwards.
Sure, and aloha from Hawaii, everyone. My name is Joe Wilson. I'm one of the filmmakers that was mentioned. We're Hawaii-based filmmakers who work from a place that all of you are talking about today, which is making sure that the voices of the most marginalized and the most vulnerable in our communities are heard and are at the table where decisions are being made about our communities, our environment, and our lives, etc. I think, as you'll see in the film today, I'm here simply as a vehicle for the voices that you'll be hearing from. We work in all the films that we do. We've made films here in Hawaii, one called Kumuhina. We made one about a community of Leti and Tonga called Letis in Waiting, and now this one about the Fa'atama, or transgender men in Samoa, in collaboration with the people whose faces, voices, and experiences you'll be seeing. So we believe very much, as you do, that it is the people themselves who must speak for themselves and be heard. So we hope you enjoy this short film, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that might come up afterwards.
We will cue up the film and then be able to, everyone can get their popcorn out and their ava and be able to enjoy this movie. And then we'll have questions and conversation right afterwards. Amish? Go. Amish, is your volume on? And then we have the graffiti artist coming back again. Amish, working on the sound.
We're on our way to prepare the umu for today, so all the rotors gonna be there.
Oh, so close. We had it, Amish. Can we go back to that?
Sorry, just having some technical difficulties. Joshua, was that video playing before, earlier?
Yeah. All good? You didn't have your breakfast?
Joshua, was that video playing earlier?
The video was playing, but we had no sound from your side.
Okay.
So how about we just pull it back? There we go. Pull it back to the beginning.
Is that better now? Let me check.
Let's move it back and then we'll see. We'll let you know. Okay, I can hear.
Perfect.
we're on our way to prepare the umu for today. So all the rotors gonna be there. Los amor here to my prayer. Go fire, wale avesea. Los amor here to my prayer. This kind of job is especially for hands or for boys, but we actually can do it because we are I was born in Samoa and was raised by my grandmother. When I got in 8th grade in the school, and then I found my first kiss. And it was a girl. When I did that, I realized that this is really who I am. But the sad part, it was really hard for me to come out because of my family was really strict. When I was young, I haven't seen anybody like me. And I thought, I am the only person in the whole world just like this. Even when I go to church, I have to wear a miniskirt and a top. So I was thinking, I think it's better for me to stay home and not go anywhere and I was trying to build my courage to come out of the box. But finally, I met some of them. And now we are like a family. We share each other. We give advices to each other and encourage them to believe in themselves. Fa'atama means female to a male. Fa'atama. When I was 14 years old, I know that time I was a tomboy. And I tell my parents, I don't like guys, I only like girls. And he turn around and get your stuff and move out. Go look a place to stay. Almighty, please beat me up till I went to bed with bruises on my body and tears on my eyes every time. I used to sleep in here. I have to sleep on that corner. I got nothing on me to buy food and clothes, water. All I know. All I know, just me and my clothes, what I'm wearing at the time. I don't know. I got nothing on me. I just want to be.
Amish, we just lost it when she said she had nothing on her, and then we lost video.
All right, I'll on to it.
So, I know clothes, water. All I know, just me and my clothes, what I'm wearing on that time. I don't know. I got nothing on me. I just want to be. I just want to be gone on that. That's why I'm thinking like that. I'm gonna hang myself. That's what I was thinking. What I'm gonna do next. I was homeless on 3 years. It's not good for me.
My name is Vanilla Heather. As everyone call me Ice, Mr. Ice. The Rogers is the group of trans men. The Rogers was established last year when Tutuoli'i wants to have our first trans men group. Roger is the former president of the Samoa Fafine Association, and she was the one that inspired this job. She was kind of mad at me, like, where are all the trans men? If you don't come up with a group of trans men, and that's it for you. We are first organization ever in the Pacific. And that's from Mama Roger.
Malo, nagpakimarka pa si Vegas. Ele mafainga bali nga ula MJ ale uman ka ko ula. E nira ka ko nga may ka ko ula. No what side up ka ko sketch. Nga ngayon au fongo ya Tonu Van Mari Mal. Ke faya ko sa awaya nga equal stage. Awang ay fala nga sa si first time lo la perform na Rogers lumo ka. Ia o ako kamali lumay o it's for Roger. Ole pageant there, it's all for Roger. The former president of Safa'a. Ile mga umiyan ko nga mene
Por okay, lo fia fia and tan beki. And tan from what is also there's a point of like Samoa has a special service for Fatama and Fafafine before the pageant. It's a great feeling for us to be part of the service this year because we just established our Rogers last year. So, and this is the first time ever for the Fatama to be in church with the Fafafine.
I really like going to church on Sunday, but I used to wear the dress clothes when I go to church.
The Rogers, that was the first time ever they went to church, you know, because of the dress code in our villages and churches.
Yeah. What if we find our number? Everyone on TV is gonna laugh at me. But you shut up a bear on the side.
He was a taxi driver back then. Some of my friends, we called for a taxi, and this one came to pick us up.
She's so attractive and she's so beautiful to me. And I fell for her the minute I saw Mari.
The first person I told was my brother, and he said, "What's going on? Why you're not eating? Why? What's going on?" And I said, "I'm in love." And, yeah? Who's the boy?
I'm the one.
No, I'm in love with a girl. And I was so surprised how his reaction. Instead of slapping me in the face, well, he jumped right up and hugged me. And he was hugging me and he said, if I'm happy with my decision, he'll support me.
When I told my grandpa that I don't like boys, and he goes, "Okay, I'll give you the man's job to do all your life, to test you out whether you can handle man's jobs or not. If you're not past the test, and then you have to go back to wear a dress, like, oh, okay, and then I'll put my every effort there to prove my grandpa that I can do it." Because he doesn't want me to get suffer when he's gone. You know, if I want to be a man, and then I told my grandpa, "Don't say if I want to be. No, I am. I am because I feel like a man." When I passed the test,
he started buying you underwear.
And even when he passed away, my grandma saved all my grandpa's undies for me. You know? Yeah.
we have Talanoa, put a lot of effort and hard work into putting together this association of Talanoa. So that's why they're called graduates.
I definitely love the music there. And I definitely want to thank everyone for their patience, especially Dean and Joe for it's a beautiful film, and I almost brings a tear to my eye. It's the sweetest line where it says, "Most beautiful person I ever saw," and that admiration for one another, and it really shows that love is universal and the language that we all need, and that's how the SDGs should really be fueled. And I'll hand it over to the co-producers and the director, and really want to thank you so much for sharing your film, and apologies that it wasn't as crisp and perfect as the one time I saw it, but the story came across through choppy. It was like swimming through rough waves, but still the message resonated so loud and clear, and definitely a love story, but then also a story of human liberation as well.
It's so true. Thanks, for your patience. I know this is a very hard kind of forum in which to do those kinds of streamings, and I'll be happy to make the link available to people who feel that it may be useful in the work that they're doing. We use film, I think, as many of you understand, storytelling sometimes is the best way to create opportunities for people to come together to push through some of the hard things that you're talking about here and come up with solutions that are community-based and that should be implemented by those who are making decisions about our communities and our countries. I just want to give a shout out actually to the Rogers here and to the organization. That's one of the leading organizations in the Pacific when it comes to human rights, and that's the Samoa Fa'afafine Association that has been working for decades in Samoa on the rights of gender and sexual minorities. And it was under one of their really important leaders, Roger Stanley, who has passed away in the past year or so, who really created the space for the Rogers to come together. So it was Roger Stanley who had kind of put the call out to the Fa'atama, or transgender men in her community, who were under the radar, hidden in the shadows, being rejected by their families, thrown out, from their churches and schools and institutions, who knew they needed a space and a way to come together to be able to, one, support themselves, and two, kind of push forward for their own dignity and rights. And when she created that space under the umbrella of the Samoa Fa'afafine Association, it allowed this group to start to kind of really find themselves and put their own roots in the ground. And what they're doing now is, and we hope the film and conversations like this help to support, is by raising their visibility and creating opportunities for people to see their humanity, which is obvious to so many of us and infuriating that it is such a struggle for them simply to be able to walk with dignity in their own communities, to be able to go to school, all the things that need to be in place, the basic things that need to be in place for people to succeed. They're using this film and Talanoa sessions to create support for, one, a shelter that they know needs to be in place for all of those young people who don't have the support that they need to be able to succeed, and then hopefully to work in the international arena, first in the the Pacific arena, and then in the international human rights arena, to make sure that their stories are seen and heard and understood, and that their work is supported, and that they also support, obviously, all of the other things that are so important, addressing climate change, addressing rights to, economic rights, political rights, social rights, etc. It's all part of the same cloth, and we feel it's really important to make sure that gender and sexual minorities everywhere are included in these conversations. So, and I'd be happy to put people in touch with the leadership of these organizations if you're not already in touch with them, because they have much to say about their work.
Mahalo, thank you so much. And I think we have Seale back as well, and maybe she's able to see some of the film, and also if there's other speakers that want to ask questions as well. Seale?
Thank you, Joshua. Can you hear me now?
Perfect. And
okay. Thank you. Sorry that has been of disruptions from our internet connections in our system. I probably may not pick up from the conversations while I was being cut off, but I just want to comment on the film, and I'll probably can have a sorry, and I probably can have a kind of a open Talanoa, in the sense that that what the message comes out from the film. In the Pacific, we still struggle with that in terms of the sensitivity of the conservative perspective that we often have in our community when it comes to certain minority groups. And I think this is one of the positive sides of the SDG and the VNR, where it allows us to highlight some of those issues that minority groups are facing. But for us to talk about leaving no one behind, it has to be much more practical than just a concept. And although we will how we perceive some of those groups, but what we want to highlight is that this is one of the positive things about the SDG and the VNR process, that we allow, and even ourselves, civil society in our own space, we often don't have, reaching out to some of those groups, because there are sensitive issues that we feel that we can't even have an open, constructive conversations about those issues and listen to what they have. So I'm happy that we are. That's why we are wanted to highlight the film. The other one is that the innovations of how we present our issue. It can be in a film. It can be in a different way that some of our young people can use to project our issue forward in different way, and that's why we felt that it's a good idea just to share how such an sensitive issue can be presented in a different way, that it just is powerful to see how it can change policies and things that are a lot more inclusive. The other one that I just want to pick up is the gender issue, and that has been across the board within our Pacific, where in a lot of our report from government, it shows that the indicators around women participation in parliament, women economic empowerment are all the same. That there is a very low level when it comes to that. Very high recognitions that the problem of violence against women, for example, across the board in all of our countries. So those are the things that we need to pay attention to in finding and pushing our government. What do we need to do together to address those issues? And we don't have anyone from FSM, but FSM is also reported this year. And I just want to quickly share what the civil society in FSM had put out. They were focusing very much on education, and they recognize like the high enrollment of their young people. So FSM has about 35% of their populations are children below 15 years old. Yeah, and the medium age is 21. So they have a very highly dominated young populations. And what civil society are calling for is the sector of education. And they believe that if there is any change that they want to see, changing the mentality of people in engaging more women, they need to target that from the education perspective, making sure that people are, being educated, the curriculum, all of that being included in there. But they also highlighted that in the national budget, a lot of the funds that goes to education is coming from the ODA, and they have the Compact of Free Association with the US that is, supporting their budget. And education is very much supported with the budget from the US. Yeah, but that Compact of Free Association is coming to an end in 2023. So what civil society has been asking government is that what is their alternative policy directions and plan of actions related to how COVID-19 is going to have an impact on these negotiations of the Compact for Free Association and the ODA instruments. So what is it that the government had in place to address that? Unfortunately, the government of FSM had, when they were presenting the VNR, they did a pre-recording. So they were just like record and send, and so they did not allow anyone to do questions. So the civil society and FSM did not have the opportunity to make their submissions on the VNR process. They asked to send it on email. So that was a really concern for us, because we felt like that the opportunity of the virtual platform should have allowed civil society more participations and more engaging. But then we still find that some of our government are putting restrictions for whatever reasons. And that really affected our opportunity for civil society to present their case. So I just want to put that out there as an example of the struggle that we still see in how we can work around finding opportunity to see civil society more engaged at all levels. Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you so much, Siale, to share really the hardship that when people do put all the time to try to make a process work that's not strong enough, then to not be included even adds insult to injury. And of course, it doesn't happen every year. So it's also really seeing civil society doing everything up against every obstacle to still organize and make sure that the voice of the people is heard. And so I think that brings us to a great point towards the end. I would open up if there's any concluding comments from anyone from Oceania that wanted to share. And really want to thank Joe as well for putting the extra films in there. I'm going to have to try to save the chat so I can go back to those later. Patrick, is there anything you'd like to say in closing as well after Siale's points?
Yeah, thank you, Joshua, and thank you, Siale, and thank you, everybody, for this and battling through the technology. I think it's, we can see the sort of digital divide here as well that makes participation very difficult for a lot of people. And I know that we wanted to hear from friends and colleagues in Papua New Guinea, where they're really facing many issues, including around resource extraction, mining, seabed mining, the big development around Free the River and the Save the Sipit campaign, which are totally at odds with the SDGs. There is just no joining up between the commitments that are made in the SDGs and the reality of the development that is happening on the ground that's being allowed. And we fear that there'll be more pressure for that kind of development as governments look to get out of the economic impacts of COVID and the collapse. But there is an opportunity now to reset also, that I think we see that from some governments, from some different organizations, to say COVID has to change us, the way that we do things, our priorities, what we value, and the way forward. And the SDGs process, this VNR process, should have provided that opportunity. We don't hear enough from the voices of people on the ground. So can I say from DTP, we're very committed just to working with Piango and to working with others in the Pacific, CCF, our partners in Fiji, and other organizations, to try and make sure the voices from the Pacific are heard, that the processes like the VNR, the UPR, the treaty bodies, the special procedures, PIF, all of those processes really do hear the voices from the ground, and that people can have a say over their own development and influence the decisions that are made. And the Pacific voices at this time are just so important in terms of shaping what happens in our world. So thank you everybody for joining the conversation at all different times, and Joshua, for your very hard work in putting all of this together, and as well, and my colleagues Amish and Claire, and we look forward to the conversation continuing, and for us finding new ways of collaboration. And yeah, thank you very much also for sharing the film. It's a very powerful way of educating people, I think, of getting voices up, and for us learning and being open to learning as well. So thank you very much. I think it's been very rich, and a number of the people who had to leave have said just how rich this conversation is. So I think we do have somebody now who's joined us from PNG, and maybe we
Claire.
But thank you very much, and look forward to speaking again and to developing work together again. Thank you.
Claire Kuru, I think we saw your name from Papua New Guinea, and maybe you might want to share. I know Papua New Guinea had a couple of big important issues. The International Seabed Authority in Jamaica was going to be voting and looking at that issue. And I know you were one of the first places that actually had that on the agenda. Claire Kuru, are you there? Would you like to be able to share and close us out in our final moments? So it's great to hear your voice, and thank you for participating.
Good morning from PNG. I'm sorry that I've only joined in later. Thank you to Seale for sharing the information as well. Currently, I believe that many of you are aware that PNG is facing many issues with regards to the natural resources and extractive industries. But currently, the biggest issue that we are facing is gender-based violence, and specifically domestic related. There are many calls from many different civil society organizations. There is great discussion on how best to deal with these two issues. But I'm not sure how many of you are aware we have more than 800 cultures here, which makes it a bit more difficult to try and get a cohesive movement. There are many different cultural perspectives on how the role of the boy child, the girl child, the men and the women, and also the other genders, how they're viewed. I can only speak for myself, and I believe that there is a conscious awakening in many of the generation that is the decision-making generation. I believe that civil society will start to be more cohesive, especially with the people that we have now that are very passionate about these issues, regardless of not just civil society, but also the corporate sector and government as well. Thank you.
Mahalo. Thank you so much, Claire. We're so glad you could join. And that's exactly where we should be, of a socially conscious awakening. And that also brings us back to our morning film we saw from Brown Girl Woke from Samoa and the dancing that they did. And it was amazing to see them put into a dance all the issues of bullying and some of the issues you described as well with domestic violence. And it links as well with COVID crisis. All the crises are connected and coming like waves. So 1 month after they talked about everyone locking down, then the issue of domestic violence coming up even higher, child abuse as well. And then, of course, you have cyclones coming through Oceania. So we just see how everything is interconnected. And I think Patrick brought up a great point of, it's a chance for us to realize that normal was nauseous to many places and was definitely not headed in the right direction. And it's time for us to restart with a rights-based approach of what we desire and what matters most. I think we lost that with all the waves of colonization and capitalism and other things happening and coming to the shores of Oceania. So it allows us to maybe not have so many people visiting and have a time for all of us, instead of being so busy at so many meetings, although we're all Zooming too much, to be able to sit around and talk to each other a bit more. And I really want to thank Siale as well, and Piango, and partnering, as well as Kate and DTP, and everyone being able to really do it the only way that we would in the Pacific. We take a 1-hour side event and turn it into 4 hours with the side event, and then Talanoa when everybody else wakes up. And then, of course, no one's there to remove us from the room for the next NGO to come in. So we're able to spend 4 hours together. And as we can see, it's really just the beginning. And I hope everyone enjoyed the ideas we had to try to bring film and speakers and be able to also, as Siale said in the beginning, to come back after the VNR and see what worked and what didn't and ways we can go forward. So I'll stop there. And Siale, if you want a closing, and thank you everyone again for joining.
Thank you, Joshua, and thank you everyone for joining. We had experienced some problem with connections. Patrick and his team, Joshua, and a lot of other people that had put in a lot of effort in making this happen. Thank you very much. Let's say that this is a beginning of how we continue to create space to have discussions in Talanoa, so that the COVID-19 doesn't get the best of us. We still find ways to do as the Pacific as we always love, have Talanoa and articulate things, and then at the end of the day we go back to our community and see what best that we can do. As you have seen, COVID-19, what we have heard from Europe and everywhere else in the Pacific, in the world, they asked to be kind, they asked to share. They're just talking to the values that we had in our region, in our Pacific. So I know that we take that for granted, but it's call for all of us to work together. We have now connected to the Hawaiian team, to the Australian, and sometimes we have seen a lot of, particularly money, that divided us, our region and our Oceania. It's about time that we all come together and find ways to move our people forward. So I'll finish off from what we have heard so far. Is about time that this is a call for humanity, and that speaks to the human rights. But how does that roll out in our region? So thank you everyone for being in this space. We hope that we will be have another opportunity of bringing people together and have a space that we can find, that we can say whatever we want to say, because this is where we have the Talanoa and find solutions. And those solutions are ours. And I think that's what we appreciate in your joining. To all of our Piango Network and our CSO families in the region and in Oceania, thank you and have a good weekend, everyone. Malo.
Mahalo. Thank you. We hope.